Today it's my honor to introduce our speaker who's very familiar to us during all of our major holidays, I'll call them, certainly for Easter. I had the pleasure of listening to Tom Baker this morning at our sunrise service, which was absolutely spectacular. As the sun was coming up behind Tom, I saw a little twinkle in his eye. I don't know if it was the sunlight or I think it was from Tom. As the Fae will tell you, there's magic in the air, and that twinkle in the eye can signify that magic, and I love that. Tom is a well-known speaker to us. He speaks of his life experiences as a counselor, from being a Catholic priest, but mostly I think he speaks from his heart, and I think he speaks from that presence of our Christ that is deep within him and abides with him always. So Tom, come up and share your magic with us today. Welcome. Welcome, Tom.
Well, I apologize for wearing my sunglasses this morning. I was in a hurry, and I left my regular glasses in the car. So I do look cool. Yeah. Right, brother. But yeah, I can see to read. And what I'm going to do today, well, let me check this out first. On the 8th day, God created vodka. Nope. Adam's ale. Next year. Yes. Next year at Christmas, perhaps. Well, yeah, the talk I'm going to give today is going to be punctuated by my poems. I wrote this book of poems, and it took my whole life to do it. So they're important to me in the way that some people's children are important to them. They've been with me for a long time. So I'm going to read a poem at first, and I may have read it here. Forgive me if you've heard it before, but good poems are nice to hear again. It's called A Premature Burial. It's a little funny. So if you have a problem laughing in church, set it aside. Father Al was reciting the 23rd Psalm when he began to slip on the artificial grass and slide into the grave. It's really happened. I was there. Suddenly he found himself in the valley of the shadow of death beneath the casket. A grave man indeed. One minute he was here, the next he was gone. A prelude to the deceased. Father Al stood up and reached for help and was pulled out of the grave by the mourners, all of them suppressing giggles. Father Al tried to continue his funereal solemnity, then laughed out loud, and everyone joined him. An expression of joy the cemetery had never heard. Finally, the casket was lowered into the earth. Father Al threw dirt on it, reciting, "O man, ye are dust, and to dust ye shall return." But carefully now that his words so recently applied to himself. Well, that said, I better not. So I'm in a little fix this morning. I picked that poem because it's about a man sliding back into the grave, into death. And that's what I have felt the church has done just about every Easter. We used to say when I was a priest that Easter was a footnote to Good Friday, because everybody always talked about having their sins forgiven at Easter. Isn't this great? We're resurrection people, so we don't have any more sins. Wonderful. I don't think it was like that, and I don't think Jesus was that kind of person. I don't think he saw people as sinners. I think he saw them as people. You know, he didn't label people. He didn't diagnose people. He didn't critique people. He let people be the people that they were. So I keep thinking, what was it like to meet Jesus the person? We're fortunate to have Paula McDeachy in the audience today. She's writing a book about Jesus the person. Did you finish it? Not yet. Oh, okay. Okay. I thought so. But I've thought a little bit about what it must have been like to be with Jesus, just as a regular person, you know. And one thing I thought of was that the disciples would probably get frustrated with Jesus. He was always running off to the wilderness or walking on water or changing water to wine. I mean, you know, he was his own headline constantly. And I would think of the disciples as going, Jesus, Jesus. What in the hell are you doing? And of course, he would say, there is no hell. Come on, come on, come on. Don't be silly. So I've been searching for the way Jesus was. My intuition tells me he was a very easygoing guy because he was at peace. If you notice in my voice, there's a little push, just in the way I'm talking right now. I'm pushing something. I'm not exactly selling it, but I'm pushing it, okay? Jesus was not like that. He was not selling something. He was something. He is something. So being with him was being like to be with a person who was authentically themselves and who was not ashamed of themselves, nor was he ashamed of us. Now, I don't know about you, but my experience of churches has been that they're very solemn places. I remember being a priest and laughing with some people, and somebody was always ready to say, oh, you're having too much fun. Too much fun. And I'd say, well, why not have fun now? He says, well, you have fun later. We go to heaven. Now we sacrifice. And I'd go, okay. I didn't want to fight it. The woman I worked with in the youth group, I was sitting there one morning, and she said, what are you going to do next week? And I said, I'm going to go on vacation. And she says, well, I guess you deserve it. I know it. They're little people with these wet blankets that walk around and whoop. So, I think when you meet Jesus, he'll be delighted with you. If you haven't already met him, he's just as nice. He's glad to be there. Just really glad to be there. And doesn't want you to be anything else than you are. Now, I've met an awful lot of people in my life, and most of them have impressed me. There's something about people deep down that is spiritual and magical and delightful. But if you stay on the surface, all you've got is just a little Easter egg. You know, you have to break open the egg to get to something. And you have to break open the egg with people to get to something. Well, for 3 days in college, I drove a cab. Why 3 days? I have no sense of direction. I kept getting lost. And, but in those 3 days, I learned an awful lot about human beings. On the second day, I got a fare who was a prostitute. As we pulled away from the airport, she asked me if I believed in Jesus. I said, of course. How about you? I was expecting some excuse or something. And she said, oh, yes, yes. I believe in Jesus, and Jesus believes in me. Amen. Now, my pastor don't like what I do for a living, but Jesus, it's okay with him. I said, are you sure? Had a little bit of the priest in me creeping in, even at that time. And she says, of course I'm sure. Remember his girlfriend? She was just like me. Well, I was just kind of driving now. I didn't know what to say. And then she started singing Amazing Grace. And I started singing Amazing Grace. And I relaxed more than I have ever relaxed up to that time in my life. I was just completely at peace because no one was condemned. No one was left out. Sometimes when I'm talking to fundamentalists, what do I do? Oh, I bring up the fact that Jesus never punished anybody. Jesus never killed anybody, never made anybody sicker than they were. Do no harm, that. He helps people enormously, but punishing is not something he did. It's kind of like we want Jesus to be as mean as we are. So we take the meanness that's in us and projects it onto God. And then we make Jesus the one, this is a certain kind of religion now. We make Jesus the one who has to beg God for forgiveness. He's our intermediary. And his giving his life gave him the credentials to do that. I remember the people in the church had a hard time with this when I would explain it to them. Because they would say, usually, he gave up his son? Really? Just for a bunch of Israelites? I'd say, maybe he didn't. Remember, Jesus died, but he came right back. I have never understood the sacrifice of Jesus. I think when he helped people, he wasn't saying, oh, these people, there's so many of them and they stink. No, he came up to every person and said, hello, how are you, what you're about, and all that. He cared deeply about people. But we have made God both a creator and a destroyer. And that's kind of fishy. It's kind of fishy when the kindest entity in the universe also sends people to eternal damnation. But that's what a lot of religions are into, including the one I left. Now, when I was first a priest, I took care of the second grade first communion class. And the reason I took care of the class was because the school principal wanted me to tell the children about the suffering of Jesus so they could feel sufficiently guilty by Easter. This is a poem about that. It's called The High Priest and I. The high priest, in the reference of the title, is the principal of the grade school. The principal was concerned that the children did not appreciate fully the agony of Christ. He asked me to elucidate the pain on which our salvation rests to the second graders. So I detailed to the children the whip, the nails, the crown of thorns pressed upon his head, saying all of this while staring at the crucifix hanging at the back of the room. When I finished and looked at them, they stared at me, too quiet for children. One little girl who had a repaired cleft palate, who herself had suffered, asked, "Father, why did they hurt our friend?" I replied, because they didn't understand his innocence and thought, like I have not understood yours. The principal stood in the doorway, nodding his approval. Well, that's sort of sad, isn't it? But there was a moment of just intense reality when that little second grade girl with a cleft palate said, "Why did they hurt our friend?" Now, that was a question out of innocence. It wasn't a question about going to heaven or getting your just reward. It was a question from the heart, like Bruce talked about. Why did they hurt him? Why does anybody hurt us? Why does anybody hurt anybody? But a lot of this is talk, so I'd like to get down to it. How do you get to know the risen Jesus? What's the technique? Should we sit in silence for 8 hours and see what happens? Nope. Should we say the Our Father 7 times an hour? Nope. Go to a monastery or a convent? Nope. Simply don't do what Jesus didn't do. He didn't criticize people. We have gotten so that we're a people of critique. When we meet each other, we think to ourselves, what's wrong with them? Little old, little young, mole on the cheek. Something makes them imperfect. We build whole relationships around a correction process, which usually breaks into a power struggle in which both people are trying to top each other constantly and being mean to one another. I know this because I'm a marriage counselor. Yeah, I've been down in the depths, locked in a room with 2 people. But if you stop criticizing and you stop critiquing, then you start meeting Jesus. Because you've got Jesus inside of you. You have the Jesus Spirit inside of you. But in a sense, Jesus is very shy. You put him down, and he goes away. He does not persist. Now you ask him again, and he'll come back, And he'll keep coming back as long as you ask. Yeah. But he wants your attention as well as us wanting his attention. So the idea is to be curious about the other person. So I always noticed about Jesus, he didn't come at him with a healing. It's not like he came into the room and said, okay, this side, whatever's got wrong with you, think about it. Gone. No, he didn't. He was personal. People had to come up to him. People had to touch his clothing. Who touched me? Ah, it's you. What a gracious person he is. He's so kind and so polite. But he's not a fighter. Now, I think you can experience Jesus every day, the risen Jesus every day, if you're open to what's happening. Now, I have a poem, another one. I use napkins for my bookmarks. But this one is about a man who had seizures. And he had a seizure during Mass. This was daily Mass, so there were about 14 people there. I call it Holy Reenactment. It was a daily Mass when Jerry had his seizure. The only man among a dozen women and myself, the priest. At the consecration, I held the chalice aloft, and Jerry, thinking he was at home getting ready for bed, began to undress himself, stretching out of his shirt and stepping out of his pants. The women all together surrounded him and gently pulled his clothes back on, then laid him across their laps as they sat down in the pew. I continued with Mass as if the slow dance of compassion in front of me were not part of the liturgy, which in fact it was. Finally, I saw the Pietà multiplied by 12 and Christ snoring softly. Thank you. Somebody came from the heart or someplace like that. Yeah. But see that? Everybody was Christ. Jerry was Christ. I was Christ. The ladies were Christ. It was Christ loving Christ. It was that simple. Now, we could have, of course, called 911 and got him to the hospital and all of that. Or he could just sleep it off, which he did, the seizure. So you can say, well, it should have been done this way, or it should have been that way. But the heart has its own ways. And they're often not what the head proposes. The heart says, I know you, and I want to get to know you better. The head says, oh, I know all about you, and these things need to change. Okay. I'm going to read one final poem, or I could read two. Would you stay for two? Okay. I'm going to read one final poem, and then I'm going to read a poem that I regard as kind of what life is. My favorite poem that I'm remembering now is a poem called Stillness. I'm 74 years old and I have slowed down a lot. Amen. That's right. So this poem fits me now. It didn't used to. It used to be a little comment. Now I'm a little meteorite. When I am old, old, old as an oak glowing enormous in gold, at a dappling day's end, when my face is as wrinkled as the face of a pond in the wind, then when remembering is my work and a nap is my recreation, then I will be still enough to pray, to hold sunlight in my hand and wait for love, the way love has of old waited for me. Isn't that a nice, quiet poem? Yeah. And this final poem is about life and how I think life ought to be lived. If you like, take notes. Zorba's Manifesto. Remember Zorba the Greek? Yeah. Ooh. This poem is written for him. Sift the earth through your muscles, feeding, as the whale strains the sea through its baleen. Attend to the throbbing of the sun. It is the harvest anger of the Lord. Learn to hear in the whine of the stars the groans of holocausts and rapine. Flee from smoke. Love women no matter how old or torn or plain. To abuse a woman is sacrilege, for she is the earth made sacred and the sacred made incomplete. Be embarrassed only at fear, and if you meet death, embrace her and cover her mouth with yours, so she will not call out your name. Learn all you can about everything. Leave only enough ignorance in the world to fill a small funeral. Do not marry quickly, for love and impatience are murderous bedfellows. Worship God without propriety or pose, the way a leopard hunts or a tulip blooms. Bless and dance your restless bones, joined and muscled with your song. Obey as nothing else the one M1, who made your eye to be as gentle as it is precise. Respect suffering, give yourself away. It's a sweet little poem, isn't it? Yeah. So it's a poem like that. Yeah. Okay, everybody, thank you for putting up with me for a couple of minutes, and I'll go back to my seat.